The Gang of Six plan has been getting a lot of attention this week. Senator and former Office of Management and Budget Director Rob Portman says it could be a step in the right direction. He joins us live now to talk about whether that plan is going to be the one to lead to some kind of consensus on Capitol Hill. Senator, thank you for coming in today.
Shannon, thanks for having me.
What do you find to be most positive about the Gang of Six plan?
Well, the main thing is it's bipartisan. So you have Republicans and Democrats coming together, both acknowledging that we need to deal with our spending issue, and it does, I think, do a good job in terms of laying out some of the parameters. Also, it has tax reform in it, which is important not just to deal with the revenue issues, but mostly to get our economy going. So the devil's in the details, and I have not endorsed the plan. It does have some elements that I'm a little concerned about, including, I think, on the revenue side. It raises revenue on the economy relative to where we are today. But I'm encouraged by it, and I've tried to encourage the process. I also think some of the Gang of Six proposals for the longer term, because they also have a two-step process, which I know you've been talking about today a lot. Some of those longer-term proposals could fit into what's being discussed right now in terms of the debt limit talks, because they have come up with, again, a bipartisan approach here. There are plenty of spending cuts out there that some Democrat, Republican groups have agreed to, and I've counted about $2.8 trillion worth of cuts that Democrats have supported, either in the Biden group or in the Gang of Six or in the president's discussions. So that's positive. There are proposals on the table that can be done to get the spending under control.
How do you feel about a short-term, something to get us through the immediate future? We saw, Bill Daley, the White House Chief of Staff, say this morning they didn't want anything that didn't get us through at least 2013. Do you think there's any room there for the White House to change that position or nuance it a bit? Well,
we should do as much as we can. So I'm a supporter of the cut, cap, and balance proposal, and we need to get the spending under control. So if the White House was willing to cut spending and not raise taxes on a weak economy, that would be fine, but they're not. So the question is, what can we do in the short term? And I listened to what Mr. Daley said, also listened to what Secretary Geithner said this morning, and I think there is an opening here. I think what they're concerned about it is that there would not be a process to get to the longer term issue, and I think that is something that the House and Senate leaders have laid out clearly with this idea of a joint select committee, which would be required to report within 6 months for the second stage. So I'm hopeful that something can happen. I don't think it's a sustainable argument if that inability to talk about something short term is because of the election. In other words, I don't think people are going to be particularly understanding if the president blocks this because he doesn't want to deal with it because of his reelection. So if that's the issue, that we need to get this beyond the election, not necessarily what's the right thing for the country right now, I don't think it's sustainable. And I think we'll end up with something, I hope, that has real cuts, that are credible cuts, that are meaningful cuts, and then a process to have even more cuts before the next debt limit comes up. By the way, in the last 40 years, 38 times we've done a short term. So short term is the rule. The exception would be something longer term.
All right, in addition to serving the Senate, you have a unique background in that you've held other positions in Washington that give you a different perspective on exactly what we're dealing with here. What is your opinion on what happens if we get to August 2nd without a deal?
Well, I think it's bad for the country. I think it's bad for our economy. I've heard this morning people talking about the impact on interest rates. I think it's likely that there would be a downgrade. And by the way, if we simply extended the debt limit without doing anything about the underlying problem, the spending, I think there would also be a downgrade. So extending the debt limit is necessary but not sufficient. There also has to be meaningful, credible reductions in spending along with the extension. But it's not something that we want to get into, nor do we have to. Again, there are plenty of spending cuts that have been proposed by Democrats and Republicans alike. We need to come together here in the next 24 hours and come up with a proposal that actually deals with the underlying problem while extending it short term and setting up this longer process to look at tax reform, which is going to take a little longer to do, but very important for growing the economy, and some of the longer term problems, particularly with regard to entitlement spending.
Well, it's nice to hear you highlight the positive in that there is some room for agreement on spending cuts from both sides of the aisle. So thank you for bringing that into the discussion today. Senator Portman, great to see you.
Thanks, Shannon. Thanks for having me on.